Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&A. Before I jump in, I want to thank everybody for their feedback on that Analog DAC episode. I posted what I thought was going to be the final version, and then after hearing a lot of your feedback, I realized I missed a chunk of stuff. I could have reworded things, so I just reshot the me parts real quick and added an extra section just to clarify things for people. And I swear I never mean to use all of you awesome people as beta testers for these videos. But on the other hand, I do always listen to your feedback. So sorry for, giving you early access to an incomplete video. It was never the intention, but thanks for everybody that stepped up and said, hey, what about this? Or, what did you mean by that? It's really helpful for everybody else that might not be as super into this stuff as we are, that don't know the bigger picture. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate that. And I'll try to get more early access videos out, and I'll try to make them complete, I guess, or at least, as complete as they could be before passing them along. But anyway, let's jump into some questions. First up, over on Floatplane is a question from Bash Ninja. Am I planning to post the Analog DAC video to Floatplane? I see it on YouTube, but not here. So this is one of those learning curves that I was talking about that I'm not really sure what the proper procedure is. So just as I mentioned before, I posted that video on the Analog DAC that turns out it could have been better, so I made it better and re-uploaded it. And on on all other support services, all I did was just change the video link, and then in the description wrote, this was changed, thanks for your support and all that stuff. But I don't know what proper procedure is on Floatplane. Am I supposed to delete the video and then re-upload a different one? What do the supporters want to see? I'm not sure what the Floatplane rules are, although I can't imagine they'd be upset by anybody doing that. But so I guess I'd really like to do what you all want me to do. Do you still want to watch it on Floatplane to get the higher quality video? And in that case, absolutely. I'll make sure every single thing I post is on Floatplane, even if it's a repost of something else. And if not, if you'd rather just watch it through YouTube, that's cool too. I guess I'll delete any post that's irrelevant. And that's what I did this time. I said, here's this video. People responded with some great feedback, and I re-uploaded it on YouTube and then just deleted the Floatplane one. So whatever you all want, please let me know, and I will very happily do it. And thanks for reaching out about that, Bash Ninja. Next on Floatplane is Armlot. I'm so sorry if you're new to these. I mispronounce everything, and I never mean to, and I try real hard, but I never get it. It kind of looks like the Scandinavian words for like Bjorn and stuff like that, but I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm so sorry. Armulot. Please let me know how to say it right. But your actual question, whichever core I use on the Mr. FPGA, the picture I get on my 22-inch old Barco PVM is underscanned, quite tiny in the center of the screen. I use the I/O board and a DB15 to 5BNC cable. My PVC, I think you mean PVM, has 3 user inputs: on, off, contrast, and brightness, and nothing else. Is there something I could do? Preferably in software to get the picture to fill the screen. So you sent 2 pictures here, and unfortunately, I've never used any of these old Barco monitors before, and I'm not really sure why it would do that. I guess, are you using it in 15 kilohertz or 31 kilohertz modes, meaning 240p or 480p? It looks here like you have RGBS, and then I can't tell from the picture if it's 2 syncs or if it's just one, meaning H and V, or just H like regular C sync would be. So I'm not really sure what advice I can give. If it is 31 kilohertz, meaning if you are running in 480p to this, then there should be some scaling options. If you're running in 240p, I really don't know. I'm really not sure what advice to give, especially if you don't have any original consoles to compare it to. So it looks like you have NES in this picture, and if you were to hook up like a NES RGB console to this, would it look the same? And if so, then there's nothing you could do on the Mr. side of things. But if you were to hook up an original NES and it fills the screen and the Mr. doesn't, then there's probably something we could do. But in cases like this, I mean, the Mr. usually outputs exactly like the original when you're in 240p mode, including all of the weird intricacies I guess I can't speak today, and other stuff. So like if something is incompatible on the original console, it'll still be incompatible with the Mister because of how accurate it is. So I guess those are the two questions I would start with for you: is what resolution are they running in, and will a Mister core run the same or different than original consoles? And then we could go from there to try to fix it. But it looks like a very cool old PVM, and I hope that you're able to get it working right. And next, over on Patreon, Firebrand X starts us out with, have I ever noticed the brightest flesh tones on my face in the Q&A videos are crushed? Is that YouTube doing that or the camera? Yes. All kidding aside, it's a combination of things, but the number one factor is that I have lights in front of me pointing at the ceiling, and then I have the camera on auto, and that's for a whole bunch of reasons. The main reason is that it's literally out of reach for me. I have to move my desk and everything around it when I go to set up the camera, mount the camera, then move everything back, and then sit here and do that. And it works good enough. The problems that I have is when it's like a gloomy day out and I turn on all the lights. Sometimes it completely washes me out. Sometimes the camera adjusts to all of that. And it's kind of rough to figure out which is which and how to get it right. And the best thing by far would be to have some kind of computer interface so I could still mount the camera, far away from me, but be able to use a computer interface to control the focus and all that stuff. And I haven't gotten that to work right with these Sony cameras. I have with taking pictures, still pictures, but the way I do it is I essentially use the output of the camera as a webcam into a capture card. And as far as I know, at least last time I checked, there's no way to manipulate that in real time other than behind the camera. So unfortunately, it's mostly me. YouTube does ruin everything though, to the point where you could upload a file up to 120 gigabytes. So very often I'll export uncompressed and just upload that file. It takes forever to get up and then to get processed on YouTube afterwards. But that way, at least only YouTube is doing the processing and not twice, not me compressing it and then YouTube compressing it. But yeah, it's a combination of stuff, and there's nothing I could do in the short term to fix it. So by all means, point and laugh. But it's just gonna get stuck that way. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes I'm tired and then I see a video of myself and it washed out all the tired look on my face, and other times I just look like a vampire, like a glowing pasty person. So, oh well. But yeah, that's the answer for now, and hopefully I'll have it fixed at some point. A couple more this week from Diego. First of all, about the Ultimate Stick, which is the controller adapter that's supposed to be compatible with pretty much anything. What if I just used good adapters? I bet there might be some lagless adapters from some console to N64 or Genesis, right? Yeah, there are, and RAFnet makes some good ones. So I would just, I would just check and see what's out there and see if you can get a temporary solution for your setup. And then, eventually we'll all test the Ultimate Stick and other stuff that's in the works and see how good it works with other consoles, how much lag is added, if it's different lag from one console to another, etc. The other two, it looks like you were just following up from last week, so nothing that requires an answer, but thanks for keeping me up to date. And yes, I am crossing my fingers for more 2.4 gigahertz controllers from some of the bigger companies. There's a couple from Bad Reality, so I'm just going to answer them one at a time in case I make a mistake, and that way I don't have to go back and do the whole thing again. The first one, I'm excited about the possible reverse engineering of the BKM129X. I'm definitely interested since it was made around the same time as the BKM68X. Does it suffer from sync issues like the ones the 68X has with Master System? Yes. And not only that, that 129X card goes into a 9-inch BVM that I bought a couple of, and I bought those specifically to test the incompatibilities. Because so far, Vanessa, one of the Retro RGB writers, and I have been testing these back and forth, and there hasn't been one difference in compatibility, which means if something doesn't work on the 129X, it doesn't work on the 68X and vice versa. So not once have I found something that works on only one of the two, which has made testing components really, I don't want to say cheap, because nothing's cheap when you say the word BVM, but it's made it way more cost effective and easier, because now I just have this 10-inch or 9-inch monitor right here next to me that I do the testing. So one step at a time. I spoke to the person developing this, and they said, step one is let's just get RGBS working. Then step 2 is to come back and say, hey, let's see if we can make a version of this that clears up sync. And that's when I'll introduce the right people to this to hopefully make it happen. And then the final step, of course, is the BKM 68X card. But my guess is that's very far away because of the complexity. But I'm not giving up hope, especially because there's still a bunch of A-series monitors out there. So yeah, very exciting project, and giant props to the people who took the time to do all this research. Next question from Bad Reality. It's a shame that the analog DAC does not have multiple live video outputs. I agree 100%. Do I have any recommendations for HDMI splitters? So just the two parts of that, I agree. I really would have liked to have seen dual output. I think there were some technical limitations as well as cost limitations involved. But for myself personally, I would have loved to have seen at least two products then, a cheap DAC and then an expensive one. And it does, my criticism of analog is never of Kevin's products, but it's of the way the products are presented to us. So we were told that the reason that their products are so expensive to ship is because it's a premium product with premium shipping. So if it's a premium product, how come it doesn't have premium features like dual output and SPDIF output? So it's very disappointing. And talking to Kevin about it, it was just kind of like, it is what it is. And, I just wish that their marketing was a little bit more honest sometimes. And, I'm not trying to start a fight with them or anything like that. It's just when you have a company that's so brilliant at marketing, you have so many different places online just parroting whatever they tell them to say. I haven't seen one person in any of these other publications ask about dual output, shipping, any of the things that I point out. So please don't take my negativity as in I hate the product. I don't. I love it. Somebody's got to say the mid questions or cons about it and not just the pros. Also, do I have any recommendations for HDMI splitters? Please keep in mind that the stuff that I generally use, I get from Amazon, and there's no telling what you're going to get. I could buy something today, I could buy something 6 months from now, and I could buy something 6 months after that. And there's a potential that they're all identical and great, or there's a potential that all three have completely different guts with completely different chips on it. But for now, I use View HD splitters, and I like to use the one with the audio extractor as well in case I need that option. And I've had people come back and tell me they had compatibility issues. I've had mostly success. The only things I didn't have success with was using like a HD SDI converter and something else. It was like some weird stuff. But generally speaking, if you're just doing like an analog console like the Mega SG or Super NT, yeah, View HD splitters, get them right on Amazon, and they should be pretty cheap and easy to use. This question's about using VGA CRT monitors as your main source of retro gaming, and that's a really big scenario online, because depending on where you are and when you got into this, it may have been infinitely easier for you to find a pretty decent VGA monitor versus an RGB monitor. And there are some excellent ways to do that. RetroScaler A1 is one of them. I'm a few weeks away from having time to do a review on this, but I'll get to it. Obviously, any of the RetroTink products with a basic HDMI to VGA converter would work. I also think that the OSSC is a great option for that. And they all cover completely different price points as well. And there's another option out there that requires some custom firmware and some hacking, but if you get it done, it's actually pretty awesome for a decent price. It's just more of a hacker solution, if you will. But you mentioned two scenarios, one of which is kind of iffy, and the other one I don't have an answer to. So you said in the scenario of people using a FrameMeister for this, so consoles into the FrameMeister, 480p out to a converter into a CRT, you're adding about a frame and a half of lag when you do that, and you're compressing the colors to, I believe it's 420, and then trying to bring them back to 444. So it's going to add lag, and it's going to change the colors. So overall, I wouldn't recommend the FrameMeister, and I honestly don't really recommend the FrameMeister for anything anymore except streaming. Now, if you already own one, I'm by no means telling you to go throw yours out or anything like that, but streaming is the only time a FrameMeister really nails it, because you don't have to worry about lag. You could use Fireburn X profiles and everything looks awesome. You don't have to worry about compatibility. It really is a very cool device for that, but there's just so many better choices now that don't have any lag at all. And then you also asked, how much lag does the HD Fury add? And that's another converter, and I've never tested that, so I have no clue. I hope that it's zero, because any generic analog to digital or digital to analog converter should be essentially zero, less than 1 millisecond. It's never going to be zero, but if it's less than a millisecond, that's zero for gaming purposes. So I really don't know. That's a good question. But if anybody out there is looking to do this, I would stick with inexpensive solutions that are known to have zero lag. And I think the easiest out there are the easiest and most cost-effective are the RetroTink line of products, followed by the OSSC, and then followed by the RetroScaler A1, which in my limited use with this thing, it's amazing and awesome for this reason only. Respect to the creator. I'm not trying to there's no side jab there or anything like that. It's just a device designed exactly for this, and it's amazing at this. It's just a lot more expensive because of what it does. So good questions, but yeah, I don't think using a FrameMeister is the best solution for that. And the last question from Bad Reality, I think I'm going to need a little bit of clarification because while I think I know what you mean, this could be interpreted a couple of different ways. Excuse me. It says, do I know of any good SCART, JP21, or component to VGA converters? And how well is composite sync converted to HV sync? So if you're literally asking SCART to VGA, component to VGA, JP21 to VGA, and you're talking about the refresh rate, so 15 to 31 kilohertz, meaning 240p to 480p. All the devices I just talked about are going to be it. The OSSC, the TINC2X, and all that stuff. If you're talking about converting RGB-S, which is SCART, to RGB-HV, which is generally what you'd find in VGA, any of the Extron sync devices should be fine. But that's kind of a hard question to answer because I need to know the context. So if you're just talking about converting RGBS to RGB-HV, or if you're specifically converting component video to VGA, the stuff that I talk about is usually RetroTink products, OSSC, Extron equipment. But if you just want to clarify exactly your use case, I'd be able to answer it a little better. Conrad Klaus was following up to our very important beer discussion about last week and suggested I try some Spaten Optimator. Once again, I'm so sorry for my terrible pronunciation. That looks awesome. And it looks like we do have it in the U.S., but it's imported by Anheuser-Busch. So for anybody that's into beer, sometimes beer is distributed worldwide, and other times you rely on more regional distributors to make it and sell it. So I'm not really sure what it is, but I'm definitely going to check into it. It looks like there isn't any place in Manhattan, but there are some places in Jersey, kind of near like Digital Press video games. So I'm totally in. I'm totally buying one of these as soon as I get a chance to. Thank you very much for the recommendation. Jason D said they heard someone say the RetroTink does not have a comb filter for composite video. Is that true? Does the FrameMeister, and what exactly does that filter do? I haven't talked to Mike in a bit. I should probably message him about this, but I don't know if it does or not. But in my testing of the Rad 2X and in the RetroTink 2X and 2X Pro, I think it does as good of a job for composite video as one could realistically expect. If it doesn't have a comb filter, maybe adding one would improve it a little bit. If it does have a comb filter, maybe putting a much better on would improve it even more. But I think all of that looks past the important point is that we're scaling composite video. So it's never going to look like S-Video or RGB in most cases. I actually still think there are a few consoles that output some pretty impressive looking composite video. But generally speaking, you're never going to be able to make it look as sharp and as clear on a flat screen as RGB. And that's why I always try to tell people, in the context of a CRT, composite video is a perfectly good choice. Don't ever let anybody composite shame you. You don't need RGB on a CRT to have a great experience. On a flat screen, if you're just starting out, composite's fine for people starting out because you don't have to spend as much money. You don't have to worry about craziness. But even with the Rad 2X cables, I was very impressed by the composite performance, all things considered. It's still not ever going to be that much better because when you scale composite video, you scale everything, the interference, the color bleeds and all that. So what ends up looking pretty neat on a CRT and passable in 480p on a flat screen, once you start scaling past that, it's just gonna look ugly. So I'm sorry that I don't know the direct answers to the questions. I don't think the question matters as much as most people talking about it think. I mean that respectfully. I'm obviously guilty of all that myself sometimes, but I just think people hear a buzzword like comb filter and don't understand the real world implications of what that means on a flat screen. So I think it has some kind of comb filter in there. I don't think it has like the best one ever, but I don't think the difference between the two would be massive once you start getting past 480p. So even if the FrameMeister has an amazing one, if you're scaling that image to 1080p, still not going to look that great. So hopefully that was a clear enough answer. I didn't mean to like skirt the answer or anything. I'm just always trying to be honest. And Monkey Pete wanted to know if I had gotten a chance to try those GBS scalers with the custom firmware. And I have 2 sitting next to me. I have 2 of the Wi-Fi modules that you need. I just haven't done it yet because I want to document what I do so that I could make a video and a page about it to help other people do the same thing. Like most technical projects, the info out there right now is scattered and not so clear for beginners, so I'm going to try to help that. But from what I've heard from people that I trust, it takes a while to get it set up for a non-experienced user. But once you do, you have the potential of having a scaler with incredibly low lag and even does a pretty good job deinterlacing. So I really want to jump into that as soon as I can. It might be a month before I get to it. And I'm really trying to stick to a set schedule of 3 videos a week, like, Q&A, weekly podcast, and then something fancier, but something always pulls my feet out from under me and stops that from happening. So trying my best. I'll get to it as soon as I can, but it seems like it could be a pretty intriguing solution. Ryan wanted to know if I knew much about line doublers for an arcade cabinet. They just got a Naomi cab with a 31 kilohertz monitor on board and would at some point also like to set it up to do JAMA. They looked at a few options, which included finding a TriSync monitor, changing the CRT tube control board, or a few devices that did a meh job and added lag and degraded the picture. So I think that I would start, unless you've already done this, I would start by getting the exact model of the tube that's in there. And then I would look into, are you sure it's 31 kilohertz only? And then how does anybody offer something like changing the tube control board to allow for multiple frequencies? If so, if it already accepts it, and if it's just something where you could buy a tube board and slap it on there, that's what I would do. And now you basically have an arcade cab that you just need to have some kind of adapters. But if not, if you're stuck with only 31 kilohertz, I've mentioned it before, but in this write-up, but the RetroScaler A1, that might be a perfect device for this, because then you would just put your JAMA through this. You would probably want to make a custom cable and let this do all of the adapting of everything. You definitely want to read the instructions, because this could be kind of complicated. But basically, you program the INI file correctly based on the micro SD card that's in there, or that you would have to put in there. Make yourself some custom cables so that your arcade controls get passed off to the JAMA board, but the video circuit gets passed through this. And then that's it. And then you should have a really great solution. It's expensive, though. It's like $225 or something like that. So you could do the same thing with a RetroTink and turn scan lines on. And, there's now great options, finally, for people who need to do exactly this. But I would just double check the cab itself first, because that's, I'm looking into getting some more cabs as well. I have no place to put them, which is what's been delaying this whole thing. I would have had 10 cabs right now that I could have found for great prices if I had somewhere to put them. But, and I'm looking into the same things as you as well. How do I interface all of my different arcade boards to one cabinet just to make it easier? So hopefully I'll have a chance to document everything I do and make some videos and some pages on it. But for now, that's what I would start for you. Double check the tube itself. Double check what people have done to upgrade that tube, and if not, just pick a device that doubles to 31 kilohertz without too much issues. And if you have one that adds scan lines, it's going to look real close to a regular arcade monitor. And Dane Olds said they just finished a triple bypass install on a VA1 Model 2 Genesis. Everything works great, but the picture is a little dark. I noticed in the triple bypass article on RGB that it's set up for 75 ohm C-Sync. They have a standard Genesis 2 SCART cable that they've been using for years, and everything looked fine. But now, since it's darker, are the components in the cable affecting it. So there's a few answers to your questions. First and foremost, it doesn't really matter what version of the triple bypass you have or what the sync settings are set to. You should be using a properly built Genesis 2 cable that does have the components on the RGB lines. So that's totally cool and totally normal. As far as sync goes, sync will not affect brightness, but it will affect it working or not. So if you have a version 2 triple bypass, this is not an issue at all. If you have a version 1 triple bypass, make sure the C-Sync jumper is set to TTL, because you want the exact output that a Genesis outputs so that your cable will work properly on everything. We removed that option from the version 2 because it's not something that 99.9% of the people installing this would ever want to use, and it's better to just take that one point of failure away. So neither of those things are the issue, but I do want to address the darkness part. First and foremost, if your cable came from somebody that wasn't a reputable seller, you don't really know what the quality of it is. But if it worked perfect before, it should be fine on this one. The other thing to keep in mind is that Genesis consoles varied widely in tolerance. So it would be perfectly plausible for you to have a Genesis console that was way too hot. Voltage was too high, brightness was way too high, things were getting bloomed out. And then you do a triple bypass, and now it's near exact what it's supposed to be, which is darker. Also, usually when the colors are calibrated more, it feels darker because you don't have anything blooming out on you like that. So I guess the best thing to decide is, do you have before and after pictures? And how dark is too dark? And also remember that if a picture is too dark, meaning just a little bit, not significantly, but if it's just a little bit too dark, you could always just kick up your brightness a little bit. But if it's too bright, you can never get rid of that washed out look. The image is destroyed after that. So if you give me a little bit more info, I could help. But as far as the mechanics of your setup goes, as long as it was installed properly, you didn't miss any trace cuts or anything like that, so you don't have two things going to the same pins. As long as it was installed properly and you're using the right cables, your setup should be totally fine. So the only other thing I would check is double and triple check that everything that needed to be severed was properly severed. You're tapping the RGB lines from the right places and all that stuff, and kind of just go from there. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thank you so much for everybody's support. And I'm sorry also for, once again, releasing it a day early. So if you were waiting till now to have your question done, sorry if I missed it. Just please ask it again next week. And for anybody new to these Q&As, ask any question you would like wherever it is that you support in the latest Q&A post. So the way these things work, I can't really go back and sift through older posts to find out if any new questions came in. So it's best just to post on the newer one. If I miss your question, just re-ask it or message me directly. It's never intentional. It's usually a mistake. And while I've had to turn the YouTube comments on for algorithm reasons, and there'll be a better solution to that in the future, but I do want to politely remind everybody that these Q&As are a direct thank you and interaction with the people that support. I try my best to help every other place I possibly can. Twitter, other YouTube comments. If you meet me in person, I try my best to help. But I don't respond to any of the comments on these Q&As because this is really just a direct thank you for everybody that supports. So no disrespect meant to anybody else. If you can't support at the moment, or if you just don't want to, you could still enjoy the Q&As if you'd like to. They're just not something that's part of the interaction. So thank you all very much for all of your support, and I'll see you next week.